Well, welcome everybody. My name is Tiffany Goodwin Van Camp. I am the Executive Director of American Friends of Combatants for Peace. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this is your first talk with us, Combatants for Peace is a joint Palestinian-Israeli community working in solidarity to end the occupation, discrimination, and oppression. We believe in a world where all people, from the river to the sea, live in peace with dignity, justice, and liberty. The movement was founded, you guys, next year it will be 20 years. So almost 20 years ago, by Israeli and Palestinian fighters from opposing sides who chose to lay down their weapons and choose the path of nonviolence to work together for a just peace. They have been nominated 2 times for a Nobel Peace Prize. American Friends is the U.S. arm of the movement, and all of us here on this call and beyond make up a diverse community that extends beyond borders to work for collective liberation in Palestine and Israel and in our own communities. Our talk today, Sacred Witness, a report from the front lines, follows a tour that our team, AFCFP, led with CFP, where we took a delegation of 15 U.S. leaders to witness firsthand what is happening in Palestine and Israel, to connect with the nonviolent activists doing the work on the ground, and to learn how we can act in solidarity with them. Quick housekeeping, this talk is 1 hour. It will be recorded. We invite audience members to go ahead and send their questions to, let me see, Lindsay Stanek, as well as myself. You can see our Lindsay's name is in the chat. And we will feed those questions to our moderator, Nicole. I want to thank our moderator, Nicole, who is AFCFP's newest staff. She's our program and operations coordinator, and she actually designed the Sacred Witness tour that we just finished with these incredible speakers who are with us today. Nicole holds a degree in conflict resolution and reconciliation from Trinity College in Dublin and has run interfaith peace building and grassroots activist programs before joining us today. Nicole will introduce our speakers, and I just want to welcome and thank Nicole, thank all of you, and thank our speakers today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for kicking us off. Yes, and warm welcome to everyone joining our call today. I really just wanted to briefly talk a little bit about our trip, and then I'll introduce our speakers for today, and we'll go ahead and hear a little bit from each of them. So our goal with this trip was primarily to bear witness to the current situation on the ground and also to show solidarity with our Combatants for Peace team in the land, and really others in their network who are working for a just peace. We brought with us American Friends chapter leaders from the US, some partners that we work with in the policy space, academics, faith leaders, um, a variety of people from around the US who wanted to join us and show solidarity with our team. And I will say just a quick overview of some of the places that we visited, but you'll hear a little bit more about that from our speakers as well, I'm sure, as they're answering our questions today. So we, of course, visited Israel and Palestine during our time in the land. We traveled to the Combatants for Peace office in Beit Jala. We met with organizations like Standing Together and the Liam Center. We traveled to Al-Twani and Masafer Yatta. We met with Basil's family from No Other Land, that documentary that has had a lot of buzz at the Oscars lately. And we also visited the Nova site, Kibbutz Re'im, and Aluja. So we were kind of across the spectrum, very many different places that we were able to visit with and people that we were able to meet with and speak with. So you'll hear a little bit more from our speakers as well. So I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers really quickly, and we can get going and hear what they have to say. So I will first introduce Sheila Weinberg. So Rabbi Sheila Weinberg served as a congregational rabbi for 17 years. She has also worked in the fields of Jewish community relations, Jewish education, and Hillel. She has published widely on topics such as feminism, spiritual direction, parenting, social justice, and mindfulness from a Jewish perspective, and has contributed commentaries to Kol HaNeshama, the Reconstructionist Prayer Book. She is creator of the Jewish Mindfulness Teacher Training Program as well. She and her husband began the Philadelphia chapter of American Friends of Combatants for Peace after their trip to Israel and Palestine in 2018. So welcome, Sheila. Um, and I will introduce our next speaker, Hassan El-Tayyab, who is an author, songwriter, and the legislative director for Middle East Policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, FCNL. He leads FCNL's lobbying work to end the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, advocate for Palestinian human rights, and advances diplomacy in Iran. He also serves on the Leadership Council for Churches for Middle East Peace. His writings and commentaries have been featured in numerous national and international news outlets, including the New York Times, CNN, BBC World News, Politico, The Intercept, Business Insider, and many more. So welcome, Hassan. And I will also introduce Ariel Eckblad, who works at the intersection of theory and practice, examining how equity and justice can inform conflict resolution. As such, her teaching focuses on alternative dispute resolution and negotiation. She currently works at Georgetown University Law Center, but previously held various positions within the US government. Most recently, she was the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the US Department of State's Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, where she launched and led the department's negotiation support unit. Prior to this, she was chief of staff in the office of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and had been the National Security Legislative Counsel in the former Senate office of Vice President Kamala Harris. Welcome. And finally, I'd like to introduce Weylin Lee. Weylin Lee has been serving as one of the founding pastors at Vox Veniae in Austin, Texas for the past 19 years. He provides leadership for this contemplative liturgical Christian community that has been striving to embody nonviolent theology and practices in their community and city. He helps facilitate listening circles and nonviolent communication workshops to support their community. He also participates with the interfaith community in Austin, partnering with organizations like IACT, Interfaith Action of Central Texas, to practice interfaith dialogue and service. So welcome on, Weylin. All right. I'd love to start jumping into our questions with Ariel, if that's all right with you. I'd love to hear from you first, as someone who had never traveled to Palestine or Israel previously, and I'd like to hear some of your initial impressions of your time there.
I would love to. First of all, let me just say thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this phenomenal and amazing and heartbreaking and mind-blowing trip. So first, thank you. I'm going to do what a lot of interviewees do, which is not exactly going to answer the question you asked. I'm going to answer the question that I want to answer, but it'll be adjacent to the question you asked. I promise, Nicole. So you are correct. I had not been to the land prior to this, but I think what I really want to talk about is the land and CFP's work in the land. So I think there's my sort of observations come in two prongs, if you will. And the first prong is that what I felt and experience and what CFP feels, experience, and is working through is heartbreakingly mundane almost. And mundane in the sense that I'm a professor of conflict resolution. I study it, I teach it. And if you ask conflict resolution theorists, if you ask neuroscientists, social psychologists, humans since our inception have been creating us, them, you, they, we, you. and using those categorizations, whether it be race, class, gender, sexual orientation, creed, religion, using those distinctions to differentiate and then to distribute resources, anything of value, right? Anything of value, land, money, water. So them over there can't have the land, money, water, power, love, recognition because they are they and not a we. And so we saw that, experienced it firsthand, and heartbreaking because, oh, again, but also mundane because, oh, again, it's just something that we as a species do, right? And the other prong of it, though, was there was something that was absolutely inspiring. And I don't actually have the words still. When I came back from the trip, everyone was like, how was it? And I just often started tearing up. And people were like, okay. And I'm like, I can't verbalize. But there was something that was absolutely beautiful about watching a group of humans, despite our tendency as a species to do this over and over again, and despite the heartache and the pain and the injustice and the devastation, continue to come together to not just imagine new, better, different, but to actualize it. Like there was something about seeing a group of humans not just say, what if it didn't look this way? But in fact, what if it didn't look this way and we did something to make it better? And I will speak for myself, but in this moment, seeing a group of humans in a context that is deeply challenging and so hard, continue to hold on to that, to the possibility of cooperation, of equity, of love, it was paradigm shifting for me. It was paradigm shifting for me, and it was absolutely beautiful. And so I think those are the two biggest takeaways that I have from my time.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know that my first time interacting with Combatants for Peace as well, I definitely felt similarly to you and how inspiring it is that they're coming together and, like you said, actualizing something new and different and imaginative and inspiring. Um, Sheila, I'd like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit about how traveling to the land was different this time compared to the last time you were there in 2022 when you took your group. If you noticed any differences or just how it was for you this time.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. Beautiful to hear you speak, Ariel. It's so nice to be with Hassan and Weylin. It was really a joy and a pleasure to be together and meet you. Um, this was our third Combatants for Peace trip. We did one in 2018, one in 2022. This time, everything was worse. Everything was worse. I mean, much worse. It felt worse. For many people, we were the first group in the West Bank, and not so much on in the Israel past, but in the West Bank, the first people to visit them. We went for dinner at the home where we had been in 2022, and there were four musicians and an amazing meal. And our host told us that no one had been there since October 7th. And there was one musician who said he hadn't played really since October 7th, only one musician. And we heard this again and again and again. The city, Bethlehem, empty of tourists. East Jerusalem, empty. When we were in 2022, you couldn't get into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You couldn't get into the Church of Nativity. There were lines, there were crowds, there was nobody there. There was nobody on that whole huge plaza in Bethlehem. It was amazing. And many of the hotels were closed. The hotel we had stayed in the past was closed down, and they were partially empty. We were told, I think there was 75% unemployment in Bethlehem. And everywhere we went, people were begging us for coins to feed their children and to sell us things. And that was really harsh. Even the well-known walled off hotel in Bethlehem that was put together by the artist Banksy that we had visited in 22 was closed. So the other part I would say is that the people that we met with really appreciated us being there. It was a sacred pilgrimage and it was a sacred witness. it meant something to them that we were there. This trip was supposed to go in September, and it was canceled. And then it was shifted around, and we came in February. So it was kind of miraculous. I don't think any of us knew if we were actually going to go. The other piece were the blockades and the impossible on the West Bank if you're a Palestinian. Now, if you're an American, you have an American passport. The soldiers stop us. You show they showed us enough times. We showed our American passport. They let us move. Although sometimes we were confused and we had to turn around, and our bus driver was unbelievable. But if you're Palestinian, you can't get through. And the roadblocks are completely unpredictable. So you never know when a roadblock is going to be there. You never know when it's going to open. You never know when it's going to close. You literally cannot get from here to there. So there's no water, and this has been already a case. The settlers are more empowered and more aggressive than ever because of the government, because of the soldiers, because of the police. So I'm not going to say, what it's like in Israel. There's grief and pain among the Jews in Israel as well that we witnessed. Um, Tremendous grief, trauma, pain, but that was not the primary aspect of our witnessing. So I think that's what I have to share right now.
Thank you, Sheila. Yeah, it was really shocking to be in some of those places which are usually full of tourism and people coming to holy sites, and they were just empty. Yeah, and you also mentioned the reality when there's violence in a place, the reality of unemployment, which is so often not talked about, I think, in media and these spaces. So I think that's also very important to bring up. I appreciate you saying something about that. And yes, also the checkpoints too. I think we had learned that there were at least 878 new checkpoints that were installed in the West Bank since October 7th, which we definitely felt the reality of that trying to get around. Yeah.
Nicole, can I say one more
Yeah,
thing? Just
of
that
course.
that I meant to say, which was that meeting with the combatants, and I love the way Ariel spoke about it. There were combatants that left after October 7th, and there were combatants that joined, and others who joined, and the Combatants for Peace has grown since October 7th, which was very moving to me. It's expanded and it's grown, even though there are people that left. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Weylin, I wanted to ask you from a Christian faith perspective, from your particular worldview, as you are a pastor and you lead a community, can you talk about your experience traveling with the group and anything that stood out to you or surprised you while you were there?
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. And again, I also just want to reiterate my thanks for the opportunity to be part of this journey and part of the sacred witness and to meet such just beautiful humans that were part of this journey. So thank you again. Um, yeah, for me, I think one of the greatest appreciations I've had for this team particularly was that it was an interfaith group. There were interfaith leaders, people from other faith traditions, other backgrounds, in advocacy work, peacemaking work, and researching nonviolent movements. And I think that was such a beautiful experience, just to learn from each other, learn from so much of what people had done before or those who had gone before, getting to learn from them. And I really appreciated just the posture of listening, of learning, of trying to carry a non-dualistic perspective in experiencing what we were experiencing on the ground. And so for me, also, it was the first time being in the land, and I had always wanted to visit since I became a pastor, and um, just for me, even decades ago, imagining what it would be like to walk in these places that were described in Scripture, or just exploring these historical and religious holy sites, and just to be grounded in the physical land. And being there, there's just so much that I realized I still don't know. There's still so much I still need to learn, still so much to process and understand about the history, about just the complexities. And there were moments of grounding. There were moments of wonder, in particularly walking the old city. Being at the Western Wall for me was actually very grounding, and just being present there. And there was a surprising amount of disconnection for me, and I think I've shared with a few people on the trip that just because I think experiencing all the layers of conflict, the layers of history. I remember when we were visiting the Church of the Sepulchre, where it's the traditional site of Jesus's tomb. And the guide, our tour guide, our Palestinian guide, was just sharing the story behind how, there are six different Christian denominations that help oversee the church. But because none of them could agree who could hold the keys to the church, there's been two Muslim families just over the generations that have held the keys, tended to care for the church, opened the church, closed the church. And that stuck with me because I think one, there was a lot of disappointment, just that conflict is just rife. And that even in that context, there wasn't an ability for people to work together just to figure out who could hold the keys. Um, and I think part of, my understanding and my practice of the Christian faith um, is an attempt to really embody the life and teachings of Jesus, which are around, for me, central around caring for the marginalized, caring for the vulnerable. And that lens for me was primary when I was looking and experiencing the land. And for me, it was shocking to some degree, just what it's like to experience living in occupied land. Um, you know, Sheila shared about settlers and just being with some of these folks where literally their neighbors were settlers, next door neighbors, or even just 100 yards down would be a settler. And um, I think what I found inspiring though too was hearing of individuals, some Israeli students even, who their vision and their practice was to be protective presence for these some Bedouin villages, and just being present to offer that layer of protection was so inspiring to watch, um, and just really aligned a lot with my own perspective of what it means just to be present for the vulnerable. So that's some of my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I know it can be really shocking um, the experience of what it is actually like day to day when your feet are actually on the ground and you're walking where someone else is walking and trying to understand what their life is really like. Yeah, you also mentioned the protective presence of the students, which were actually some students that went through Combatants for Peace's religious freedom school over the summer. It was a pilot program for this. And all of those students had gone through that program and then had chosen to do protective presence in the West Bank, which I found really moving because it was a pilot program for the team, and so we weren't really sure like what that was going to look like afterwards. But it was very inspiring to meet those students and hear their experience going through the program that CFP put together, and then stepping into this space that is not necessarily safe for them either. So yeah, I found that also very inspiring. And I think it speaks also to CFP's kind of every day on the ground doing the work that we got to experience as well. Uh, Hassan, I want to ask, given your experiences during the tour, can you reflect on the current political moment and the key barriers to achieving a just peace that you observed? Also, like, how do you view the role of the international solidarity movement and what gives you hope moving forward?
Thank you, Nicole, Lindsay, Tiffany. Fantastic leadership and American Friends for Combatants for Peace. Was just so grateful to be on that trip, to be on that sacred witness tour of the land. It was my third time there, and yeah, just really inspired. We were there at an absolutely historic moment. I mean, yes, we weren't able to be there in September, but I think we were there exactly when we needed to be there and to bear witness to what was going on. While we were there, the ceasefire was in a very early stage. Obviously, welcome news, something that I think our entire movement had been working hard on. Um, but we saw a lot of violations of that ceasefire in Gaza, and we saw real escalations in the West Bank. So yes, we had some progress in one area, and that was used almost as an excuse to push for more violence and escalation in the West Bank. Complete lockdowns. One peace builder that we met on the journey, I think I was there for a couple weeks after the delegation left as well, for some FCNL stuff I was doing. And this gentleman, Sami Awad from Nonviolence International, said that right as soon as the ceasefire began, it almost like they were prepared and they had all these gates, and they, pushed for almost a full lockdown across the West Bank. So what Sheila said was absolutely right. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is making these insane comments on social media, calling for the full ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza, 2 million people, sending them to Jordan, sending them to Egypt, which is obviously fully in violation of international humanitarian law. And then more recently, even called for a full-on Armageddon of Gaza if all of the hostages were not released. And he's trying to move the goalposts of the agreement. We're now stuck somewhere in no man's land between phase 1 and phase 2. It doesn't seem like, it's really hard to read through the tea leaves because it's changing so quickly. But, it seems like diplomacy has really hit a brick wall here. Israel has put forth new terms on the agreement since we've been back. They violated key parts of the ceasefire. They're blocking all humanitarian aid, water, food, electricity to the Gaza Strip, and conducting bombings and refusing to withdraw their soldiers. Again, West Bank violence was really at maybe an all-time high in a lot of ways, or at least for several decades. Jenin was being ethnically cleansed. 40,000 Palestinians were refugees, were removed from their homes. Again, full lockdown. So deep suffering going on. The Arab reconstruction plan also happened. Like I said, so much happened while we were there. So that was put forward as a proposal to help, rebuild Gaza, come up with some sort of concession. 22 Arab countries agreed to this. It was immediately, I don't even think the Israeli government and Donald Trump even read the deal, read the 91-page report, which, included, maybe not, I thought there was a lot of concessions in that plan to the Israelis and the United States, but it was still rejected out of hand. Turning to Congress, where I'm sitting here talking to you all in earshot of the Senate right now. This is where FCNL's office is. Since Donald Trump has come into office, they've approved over $12 billion of new weapon sales to the Israeli government. Some are what they call emergency arms sales, which completely bypasses congressional oversight. I'm really grateful to folks like Senator Sanders, Tlaib, and Jayapal, who have introduced joint resolutions of disapproval to block some of those sales. So I think that's really key. So you're seeing this, despite blocking humanitarian aid, we're seeing the green lighting of all these arms sales. On what gives me hope, because that was a key part of your question. After this trip, I actually went and spent time at the Carter Center, and then spent time at a Telos conference where I spoke at in New Orleans. I actually finally just got back home on Sunday, so I'm very jet lagged. Thank you for bearing with me if I say anything that's a little out of turn right now. And this Palestinian theologian at that conference, who had flew from Nazareth, not part of our tour, but obviously we were close by. She was asked this question, and she's like, there's always this like silver lining that people are trying to find, but she's like, what we've experienced over the past 16 months is a genocide, and I need everyone to sit with that reality. And I almost started crying. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if we often give ourselves permission to really feel what's going on. And I think we need to start from that place that this is really serious, and it's getting worse and worse. But I know that we cannot stay in that feeling, especially, where we're allies and advocates, not as directly connected sometimes. I know myself, obviously my family's from the Middle East, but my family is not in Gaza right now. So I think it's really on us as Americans in particular who have all this leverage with the Israeli government due to the weapon sales, due to our military complicity in trying to, support initiatives like the Sanders JRDs, to try to rein in this and build political power as such, where we can actually be heard on Capitol Hill and in the halls of power. So I think that's really key. The thing that really gave me hope was the peace builders we met on this journey. That was the thing that gave me the most hope, that despite all the odds, that Combatants for Peace is on the ground doing protective presence. The Freedom School folks are in Bedouin villages, leveraging their Jewish identities to do protective presence. And, the folks at the Ramallah Friends School, folks at Breaking the Silence, Yesh Din, Bet Selim, Gisha, Al-Haq, like really the amount of work being done by these people is heroic. It's inspiring. And I think, again, as us as allies, and I'm telling, speaking to the choir here, because that your whole mandate as an organization is to support this work. So I think we need to keep going, double down on that. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that, despite everything, what does Bob Marley say? You can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Public opinion is dramatically shifting. That's going to continue, and that gives us an opportunity for more advocacy. But we got to double down. Back to you, Nicole.
Thanks so much, Hassan. We always appreciate your insights into the political realm of everything that's happening. Yeah, I think I'm hearing from you a little bit too in terms of where you maybe are needing to sit with some of the tragedy that's happened in the land and feeling those emotions. And then also not forgetting after that to look for the helpers, as they say. So I think that that's a really beautiful way for all of us to continue to engage, especially with what's going on in the land. Um, Ariel, I wanted to ask, as someone who has an extensive background in conflict resolution, what are some strategies that you witnessed in the land and in your work that we can utilize to help combat polarization on this particular issue?
Ah, I have so many thoughts, Nicole. But we don't have a lot of time. Can I just take a moment? We keep talking about protective presence, and I just want for folks who maybe don't know what that means, in fact, to paint a little bit of a picture. Quite literally, there were Israeli teenagers, many of whom fibbed to their parents about where they were going, said, oh, I'm going to a friend's to celebrate Shabbat. Oh, don't worry, I'm just going to go to X, Y, and Z place. And instead of, in fact, going to those places, went to the hills to sleep in a tent, an open air tent, on just mattresses, just thrown about, just sleeping. I mean, it is not as though they had some robust accommodation, sleep in a tent so that they could be ready to wake up and go put their bodies in between Palestinian shepherds and settlers who were coming to take their sheep and potentially harm them. So in the midst of all that Hassan outlined systemically, all of that was happening, right? Calls for genocide, for removal, blow them up if they don't X, Y, and Z. All that's happening. And you also, while that was happening, had 20-ish Israeli teenagers, some who used to live in settlements, sleeping in a tent so that they could wake up whenever they had to take their bodies and intervene. So for me, again, I'm trembling even talking about it. The power and the possibility of that, it speaks to a core tenet of what I teach. I am a negotiations teacher. So sort of what did Mark Twain say? To the person who has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Everything looks like a negotiation to me, okay? But I'm a negotiations teacher. And what I often tell my students is that our social world, the rules, the norms, the laws, the institutions, the processes that dictate how we get to navigate is a collective negotiation. It is a product of what is called, in some theories, intersubjective understanding. You agree and I agree, and so it is. A perfect example of this is money, right? Money only works because we have collectively agreed that it has value. Otherwise, it's just paper. Otherwise, it's just a credit card. Otherwise, it's just a Venmo. Otherwise, it's just Bitcoin. What is a Bitcoin? Seriously. You agree, I agree, and so it is. It's a negotiation. We agree on it. What I saw, what we witnessed, were people saying, we want a different agreement. We want a different agreement. And so we are going to literally put our bodies on the line to demand a renegotiation. There are many a reason why that works, right? There's something called intergroup contact theory that was created or theorized at first during the civil rights movement, in particular during Jim Crow, by a social psychologist. And there was this realization that you can have different groups of people, remember that sort of human tendency to us, them, you can bring different groups of people together, decrease prejudice, increase cooperation, if there are certain sort of tenets at play. What are those tenets? If you have human beings who are focused on a shared goal, cough, cough, combatants for peace, peaceful settlement, right? A peaceful resolution, to this conflict. If you have iterated interaction, they continue to come together. If you have cooperation, if you have equal status, and if you have an institution that allows for them, that holds them as they work towards this, that you can have groups of people who imagine themselves to be so different come together and reduce prejudice and increase cooperation. So yeah, we saw that. And there are so many other things that I could say, proof of all the things that I've read and studied and theorized on. But the core bit of it truly is that there were groups of humans who said, we want a different agreement, who recognized that, yes, systems and macro level injustice is pervasive, but micro moves, literally going to a tent and sleeping in it so that you can put your body in between, right? That is also part of a renegotiation.
Amazing. Yeah. You're so right. It is those small things that can move so much. It's incredible to witness, and it's such a privilege to get to experience some of the positive things that are happening there and happening there as a result of the work that Combats for Peace is doing too. It's very inspiring. Um, Sheila, as the chapter leader for the American Friends of Combatants for Peace in Philly, what is your hope for the combatants this year? And how is your chapter looking to support their efforts? Do you have any advice for anyone who maybe might want to start getting involved?
Thank you. Thank you. And the chapter is one of those acts to tell the stories that we're telling here today, to tell the story more loudly. And how do we do that? How do more people hear this story and that they can then identify with it and want to participate in it? And that is transformation. So, we came, Maynard, my husband, Maynard Cedar, and I went on this trip in 2018, and we started telling the story. Whoever wanted to listen, and there weren't that many people that did, and it was not so easy. But at that point, which was before the pandemic, we actually brought a couple of the combatants here, and people came to hear them, which was very powerful. And I know they take trips, and that's a very great way to start a chapter, is to bring and have the combatants themselves. And it's always a pair. It's always an Israeli Jew and a Palestinian, and they tell the tale the story together from their experience, and people respond really well to that. I mean, the ones who are going to respond. And of course, we like to raise money and help support more staff people and try to figure out ways of doing that. And, get more PR. So today, I have to tell everybody, was a big PR day for us here in Philadelphia, because the NPR, the local NPR station, one of the main leaders is someone named Jennifer Lynn, and she actually came over to our house and interviewed me. Maynard set this all up, and today there was a little program in the morning, 5:43 and 7:43, where I spoke about combatants in our trip, and she interviewed me. And all right, it was something. It was something big. It happened. So, I mean, this can happen in other communities. People have contacts and know how to figure out how to get things in the press. We have worked on campus through the work of John Evans, who was on our trip, who was a Quaker and was on the board of Haverford College, and is a wonderful, wonderful leader, also very, very well versed in what's going on in the Middle East. He was worked at the Ramallah Friends School, and he had the contacts with Haverford College, which brought the film. There are two films of the combatants that can be used as beginning places. We showed the films. First was Disturbing the Peace, and the new one is There Is Another Way. And we've done two programs of Haverford College. And, campuses, I don't have to say, are very highly polarized. So it's a great value to bring in people that can speak in this way, in this both and way that combatants has on campus. So I want to really thank John. And we had Swarthmore was involved, and a wonderful Palestinian Quaker professor as Swarthmore spoke. So it was, I value the Quaker connection and commitment to nonviolence very, very much. Another great way to start, and we'll be doing that, is the Joint Memorial. People know about that. It's Combatants has been very active in that, along with the Parents Circle. It's an incredibly moving program. More information will be sent out, and also the Nakba Memorial, how to gather together or show it. And we've done it in various ways, but it really touches. It's a way of telling the story in the heart and the body of people who have lost beloveds, and both Israelis and Palestinians. It's very, very moving, and that's a really great way to start. And we were fortunate enough in 2022 to take a trip with our Philly people. It's a miracle that happened, but the trips are the most transformative, to actually go to the land. And as you've heard the speakers here, that's really the most powerful. And it's one step after another. That's it. That's all we can do, is take the next step, and be in connection with other really people who share our hope and share our aspirations.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything that your group is doing. You're very inspiring to us all the work that you do to get the combatants message out. Truly, you are an amazing ally to everyone on the ground in the land. So thank you. Weylin, I wanted to ask, what is something you wish more Christians in the US understood about this conflict?
Yeah, so I think for me, right now in the Christian tradition, we're observing the season of Lent. It's meant to be a season, to reflect on our fragility, our mortality. It really reminds us of our humanity. And some years it's harder for me to sit in that space. Especially we live in a country, a culture that's so much about exceptionalism. So we're not really in that space a lot. But I'll say this year I'm not having a struggle at all, especially coming back from that trip. I mean, witnessing just so many layers of suffering and pain and loss and injustice, seeing firsthand the fragility of life. And so that's something that I'm sitting with. I mean, I remember one of the probably the most difficult days for me on that trip was in the morning. We got to hear, we visited one of the kibbutzes that was attacked on October 7th that morning, and hearing from a father who's my age and sharing how his son, who's also the same age as my son, being taken hostage. And then, hearing about him losing family members and, hearing that story in the morning, only to then later at that night, hearing stories from a Gaza activist and just losing so many family members during her time growing up in Gaza. And even recently, as she's moved to the West Bank, but just recently having her mother die from a drone attack. And so those stories and those experiences of fragility and injustice sit heavy for me, and it's an invitation for us to sit with them in that. And I think, for those of us who do follow the Christian tradition, there's an explicit call for us to be peacemakers. And, the way of Jesus is nonviolent. Um, there is another way. As Ariel said, there's another agreement, right? That doesn't involve scapegoating. It doesn't involve inflicting violence on those who can't advocate for themselves. But when I think of peace or peacemaking, sometimes it can be pretty limited. Um, just in terms, we think of peace as an absence of conflict. And, I remember coming across, there's a Japanese writer, he's a nonviolent activist, Kazu Haga, and he kind of references this idea of negative peace, where it's just an absence of conflict. I think he describes it as the absence of tension can come at the cost and expense of justice. And what I noticed during my time there, especially hearing from the founders of Combatants for Peace, was they do have this shared vision and goal of peacemaking, and yet there's a very clear acknowledgement that there's a power differential and that there still is injustice. And for those, you referenced this earlier, but for those who do have a chance to watch No Other Land, you should definitely watch that. And you should watch the Oscar speech that they made, both of them made together. And even in that, there was a powerful naming of, yes, we're doing this together. This is my brother, but there's an inequity. I live, under just civil law, but, my Palestinian friend lives under a military law. And so I think for me, that's kind of my takeaway, my invitation, and even my um, kind of invitation to the Christian community is to find those places where we inherently hold that power differential, and how are we actually using that to actually advocate for those who don't have a place or way to name what they need. So that's some of my reflection.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's very powerful to hear one person and their pain in the morning and another person and their pain in the evening, and they're seemingly on opposite sides, yet their pain feels the same when you hear it. And yeah, thank you so much for speaking to that and that specific community. Appreciate it. Hassan, I want to ask you a final question as well. As a lobbyist in DC, after witnessing the situation firsthand, what specific policies or actions would you recommend that our community advocate for to support a just peace? Like, I'll let you go with that, but I'm just curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. And I was also moved by what Weylin shared around hearing from Ramsey in the morning and Fatima at night, and just the heaviness there. It also kind of underscored maybe some of the injustice as well, because we don't have access to Gaza. We can't go and walk through and see everything that she and her family have dealt with. Ramsey was able to take us across where he lived, and there was, so there were these barriers and so many Palestinians from being able to get their stories heard. That was a big takeaway for me. But you didn't call me here to talk about that. You want to hear about my lobbying. So this is just an overwhelming moment, right? Like, we've got so many different things that we could talk about. Certainly the Sanders JRDs are so critical. One thing that is so critical about those particular resolutions is that they have what's called a privileged status in them, and they will be coming up for a vote. So every one of your senators, unless you live in Washington, D.C., sadly, you'll be able to ask your senator to vote in favor of these joint resolutions of disapproval. Some of the things covered in that are 35,000 bombs that the Israelis have used, these 2,000-pound bombs, or the MK-83s. And why would you need a 2,000-pound bomb in Gaza right now? These things, if you go outside of your house, look from one end of your block to the other, that's just a piece of the destruction that bomb can do. That is an insane, this is, not, it should never be used, but really should never be used in Gaza, considering how densely populated it is. Also in that sale are Caterpillar bulldozers. Why is this an emergency? I don't know. That we're going to be selling thousands of these bulldozers to carry out more home demolitions across the West Bank and possibly even Gaza. So I think doing what we can to put up an opposition on this particular sale is the number one thing on the policy front that we should be looking for, in part because we can force this vote. And I think we'll probably see that sometime in the next couple weeks, maybe in April. So call your senators, make sure that they're on board. The House, there might be some resolutions over there, but it's not privileged in the House. So it's only going to get the vote, I believe, in the Senate. So if you want to target your efforts there. I'll also say that we had the first ever JRD vote of its kind last November. And we got 19 senators on board, including Ossoff, Durbin, Shaheen, Welch. Really a nice showing of members. We got 19 then. Can we get 25? Can we get 30? That's the work that I think we need to be trying to do, is to make sure that we're no longer complicit in violations of international humanitarian law. And I'll also say complicit in violations of U.S. law and policy. The Foreign Assistance Act is pretty clear. You're not supposed to use U.S. weapons to block humanitarian aid or violate human rights. So that's the case I've been making to Congress is, let's just follow our own law. I don't want to talk about the Byzantine Empire. I don't want to talk about all of these, like this massive historical analysis right now, which is also important. But can we just follow United States law, which is very clear that we're not supposed to be sending weapons to any government that's violating, human rights and blocking humanitarian aid. It's not rocket science, So I would say that. Number two, I would also urge, if folks, I'm sure people here are already supporting the work of American Friends for Combatants for Peace, but we need to come together and support key organizations like AFCFP, folks on the ground. So, and not just you, but let's see if we can get a few friends involved in that effort too. Everybody should be doing something in this moment. So, and the last thing I'll say is the case of Mahmoud Khalil. We only have an hour till this letter closes, but Raskin and Jayapal are circulating a letter calling for justice and accountability for the ICE detention of Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia student who was detained by ICE, sent to Louisiana. They're talking about stripping him of his green card. And if you care about this issue or not, everyone should care about First Amendment rights, and people, you may agree with what he was saying, you may not agree with everything he's saying, but we should all agree that Americans and permanent residents have the ability to express their opinions freely under the First Amendment. So really important that we speak about Mahmoud Khalil's case, because that's just the canary in the coal mine, I'm afraid. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more attacks on civil society and activists across the board. So let's stick together. It will be okay, just as long as we hang in there. Back to you, Nicole.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for laying out some of those really practical things that folks can be doing, very easily from their homes. Pick up your phone, send an email, write a letter. It's great. Well, we are just about at our time. I want to thank all of our speakers so much for joining. was incredible to hear from you all and be in the land together. And definitely, I feel so privileged to learn from all of you. I will pass it now over to Lindsay to kind of close us off.
Thanks so much, Nicole. And hey, everyone, I'm Lindsay. I'm with AFCFP, and I just want to thank you all for being here today. It means a lot to be in this space with you. And I know that everyone here cares deeply about justice, about peace, and about taking action in a meaningful way. And a lot of great ways were shared on this call today. But I'm really excited to share a new way to do that and to deepen your engagement. So today we're launching something called the Solidarity Circle, and this is a new monthly donor community. And it's really an opportunity to stand alongside combatants for peace and really support their courageous work, and also to stay directly connected to the movement. So by joining this circle as a monthly donor, your support will help make possible a lot of powerful CFP-led programs on the ground. So this is from nonviolent resistance trainings to protective presence for threatened communities in Area C, like the Bedouin communities that were mentioned today in Al Uja. And this will also, provide support for simple but crucial things like printing signs and t-shirts for joint demonstrations and nonviolent activities on the ground. And a really special part of the Solidarity Circle program, members will get direct updates from CFP activists through a private WhatsApp group that we're creating. And we'll also have really special Zoom events throughout the year where you can hear directly from the activists. And like Hassan was sharing, there's so much money right now that is fueling war and division. And we really need to invest in something else to tell the stories that you heard today and to really amplify the work of nonviolence, of solidarity, and of another way. So if this speaks to you, we'd love, love, love if you join us. And I also want to note that we are inviting groups and places of worship to also join the Solidarity Circle as monthly donors. And we'll share the link in the chat. You should see that in the chat now, in order to sign up and join this community committed to collective liberation. And outside of this, we also need support early in the year to continue funding CFP's vital work ahead. There's so many activities and ceremonies and programs that are planned. So if you can just help us with a one-time donation, that also means so much as well. And lastly, I just wanted to know we have really two important dates coming up. Sheila mentioned this, but on April 29th, we'll be holding the joint memorial ceremony. And on May 15th, we'll be holding the joint Nakba remembrance ceremony. And so just save these dates on your calendar. We'll be sharing more information soon. And thank you all today for coming, for your presence, and for your support. We're building something really powerful together, and I'm so grateful to be in this work with you all. So take care, everyone.